"Your son's death is why you're getting demoted," my father said. After I spent my youth building his company, I walked out, built something better. Now he's begging me for help. Hey everyone, before we jump into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed the channel is losing some traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can support us. It's quick, free, and it helps us keep bringing you awesome content. Your support means the world. Let's keep this channel growing together. Thanks so much. Now let's start the video. Sup Reddit. I never thought I'd be posting this kind of shit on Reddit, but I need to get this off my chest. Maybe it'll help someone else who's dealing with a family that doesn't deserve the title. I'm 38 male, currently Vice President of Operations at Rivet Construction, one of the largest commercial builders in the Midwest. I oversee about 200 employees and multiple million-dollar projects across 3 states. But that's not where I started. For context, my family has owned Ryan Construction for almost 40 years. My dad, Gordon, 64 male, started it as a small residential contractor and built it into a mid-sized commercial outfit. The company's bread and butter is healthcare facilities, municipal buildings, and some high-end retail. Annual revenue was around $85 million when I was there. Growing up, I spent summers hauling lumber, cleaning job sites, and learning every aspect of the business. No special treatment. I started at the bottom like any other kid. By 16, I was doing basic framing. By 19, I was running small crews. By 25, I was managing entire projects. I literally lived and breathed that company. 80-hour weeks were standard. I missed buddies' weddings, skipped vacations, canceled dates, all for Ryan Construction. My dad's management style was old school, yelling when things went wrong, rare praise when things went right. But he knew construction inside and out, and I respected that. The crews respected him too, even if they didn't particularly like him. He built that company through sheer force of will and an insane work ethic that I inherited. My younger brother Chris, 35 male, was different. While I was waking up at 5 a.m. for job walks, he was sleeping until noon. When I was taking night classes in construction management, he was partying through a business degree dad paid for. He was the golden child who never had to earn a damn thing. Chris would show up at job sites in pressed khakis and spotless boots, bark a few orders he'd heard dad use, then disappear by lunchtime. The crews mocked him behind his back, but to his face they nodded and said, "Yes, sir," because he was the boss's son. I covered for him constantly, fixed his mistakes, redid his estimates, smoothed things over with clients he'd pissed off. My mom, Isabel, was always caught in the middle. She'd make excuses for Chris while pushing me to understand your brother's different than you. Translation: don't expect him to work as hard as you do. Mom worked as the company's office manager until the business grew enough to hire professionals. She still came in 3 days a week to help with the books, which mostly meant she kept tabs on everything for dad. Despite the family drama, the company was my future. I was next in line to take over when dad retired. Everyone knew it. The employees, the clients, the competitors, everyone except Chris, apparently. I met my wife, Grace, when we were both 27. She was an architect we hired for a medical office project. Smart as hell, didn't take any crap, and could hold her own with the roughest superintendent on my crew. Our first conversation was an argument over a design change that would have added $50,000 to the budget. She won, and I was impressed enough to ask her out. We got married a year later, and 2 years after that, our son Ethan was born. That kid, man, he was everything. Smart, funny as hell even at 6 years old, and had this way of looking at you that made you feel like the most important person in his world. I'd come home exhausted from 14-hour days, and the second I walked in, he'd sprint full speed and launch himself into my arms. Instant reset button. Ethan loved construction sites. I'd take him to the safer ones on weekends, and he'd strut around in his little hard hat and vest, inspecting everything. The guys would sneak him candy and let him sit in the equipment. By age 5, he could name every piece of heavy machinery and knew what it was for. He'd correct people if they called a backhoe an excavator. For the first time in my life, I started questioning whether the family business was worth the insane hours. I was missing bedtimes, missing t-ball games. Grace never complained, but I could tell it was wearing on her too. She'd gone part-time at her firm to have more flexibility with Ethan, while I was still grinding away 70-plus hours a week. But I kept pushing because that's what was expected. I was crushing it at work. Landed 3 major hospital contracts in 2 years. Expanded our civil division, and was on track to take over as president when Dad retired. The company had grown to 150 employees under my management, with another 200 to 300 subcontractors on our projects at any given time. Then came that Wednesday in April, the day the trajectory of my entire life changed. The call came at 2:17 p.m. I know the exact time because I checked my watch, annoyed at the interruption. I was in the middle of a heated subcontractor meeting when my phone lit up with Grace's number. Her voice was wrong, shaking. "Cole, it's Ethan. There's been an accident at school. We're at Children's Hospital. You need to come now." I don't remember driving there. I don't remember handing off the meeting or what I said to anyone. I just remember running through the ER doors and seeing Grace's face. You know that look that tells you your life is about to split into before and after? That's what I saw. Ethan had collapsed during recess. Some kind of brain aneurysm that no one knew he had. A ticking time bomb that had been there since birth. The doctors were already working on him, but it didn't look good. The pediatric neurosurgeon, Dr. Suri, explained it to us in the small consultation room. Terms like arteriovenous malformation and hemorrhagic stroke that sounded like they had no business being applied to a 6-year-old. Words like critical and uncertain and prepare yourselves. I called my dad immediately. "Ethan's in critical condition. I don't know when I'll be back." His response, "Keep me posted. We have the county bid due tomorrow." "No, I'm sorry, or we're on our way. Just a reminder about work." For 3 days, we lived in that hospital. Grace and I took shifts sleeping on the plastic chair by Ethan's bed, while doctors ran test after test. The nurses in the PICU were angels, bringing us coffee, finding us toothbrushes, updating us on every minor change. My 2 closest friends from college showed up without being asked. Sean, who works in city planning, brought us real food, handled calls, and ran interference with everyone asking questions. Steve, who's a lawyer, made sure we understood everything the doctors were telling us and helped navigate the insurance crap. Sean set up a rotation of neighbors to check on our house and walk our dog. Steve handled calls to family members and close friends. They managed everything so Grace and I could focus solely on Ethan. My mom showed up once for about 30 minutes. She brought a teddy bear and some homemade cookies, stood awkwardly by Ethan's bed, then said she had to get back because your father needs help with the McGrath proposal. Dad and Chris didn't come at all. Too busy with the Porter project, Mom explained, not looking me in the eye. On the 4th day, Dr. Suri came in with 3 other doctors. I knew before they said a word. The damage was too extensive. The bleeding couldn't be controlled. Our son was gone. Just like that. 6 years old. I remember standing in that hospital hallway, Grace sobbing against my chest, while Dr. Suri explained our options. Like there are options when your child dies. Organ donation, funeral arrangements, grief counseling. I felt like someone had scooped out everything inside me and left just enough to keep breathing. We held his small funeral 3 days later. Grace chose everything. The tiny casket, the blue suit he'd worn to my cousin's wedding, the dinosaur toys we buried with him. I couldn't make decisions. I just stood there, holding her up. Grace's family flew in from Oregon. Her parents, 2 sisters, and uncle. They took over our house, cooking, cleaning, answering the door and the phone. My crew showed up in force, hardened construction guys in ill-fitting suits, standing awkwardly with tears in their eyes. Tom, my superintendent, organized a memorial fund in Ethan's name. Sean and Steve handled all the arrangements, so we didn't have to think. Dad and Chris showed up 15 minutes late to the funeral, stood in the back, and left before the service ended. Something about an emergency client meeting they couldn't reschedule. They didn't speak to me or Grace, didn't even approach the casket. I saw Tom watching them leave, his face hardening. He caught my eye and shook his head slightly. I just turned away. I couldn't process that betrayal on top of everything else. A week after burying my son, I went back to work. Not because I was ready, hell no, but because sitting in our too-quiet house was killing me. I figured work would distract me, that I could lose myself in schedules and budgets, and not think about dinosaur pajamas and bedtime stories. Grace went back to her firm part-time. Her boss was incredibly understanding, letting her set her own hours and work from home. We were like ghosts passing in our own house, each trapped in our private grief. My team at Ryan Construction was solid. No bullshit sympathy cards or awkward conversations. Just quiet nods, a hand on the shoulder, and picking up slack without being asked. Tom, my senior superintendent, had reorganized all my projects, so the most urgent ones were handled, and the rest could wait. The guys on site were different with me. Careful, watchful. They'd pull me aside to show me something or ask a question, giving me an excuse to focus on work problems instead of my life falling apart. I appreciated it more than they knew. Around 2 p.m. on my first day back, Dad's assistant called. "Gordon wants to see you in the conference room." When I walked in, Dad was sitting at the head of the table with Chris beside him. Brett Mason, our CFO, who'd been with the company since day one, sat opposite looking uncomfortable. Nobody made eye contact. Have a seat, Cole, Dad said, like this was any other meeting. No, how are you holding up? Or, sorry about Ethan. Just, have a seat. I sat, waiting. The silence stretched until Dad finally spoke. We need to make some changes. The Porter County project is 3 weeks behind schedule and we're looking at major liquidated damages. The St. Luke's Hospital extension is over budget by $1.2 million. I stared at him. Are you serious right now? Those projects were on track when I left. What happened in the past 10 days? Chris jumped in. Don't try to blame anyone else, Cole. These were your projects. Your responsibility. Brett looked down at his notepad, saying nothing. Dad continued like I hadn't spoken. Effective immediately, you're being demoted to project manager. Chris will take over as vice president of operations. Your salary will be adjusted accordingly. The room started to spin. You're demoting me because I took time off when my son died? Business doesn't stop for personal problems, Dad said, shuffling papers. We almost lost the West Side contract while you were gone. I looked at Brett, who'd been like an uncle to me. He'd taught me estimating when I was still in high school. He wouldn't meet my eyes. This is bullshit and you know it, I said. Those projects were on schedule. I checked in with Tom before I left the hospital. What did you two do in the past week? Chris smirked. Maybe if you were focused on work instead of... Dad cut him off, but then delivered the killing blow himself. Your son's death is costing this company millions. Your son's death is why you're being demoted. If your son hadn't died, these projects would still be on track. The room went silent. Even Chris looked shocked at how Dad had phrased it. Brett finally spoke. Gordon, that's not... Stay out of this, Brett, Dad snapped. I sat there, blood roaring in my ears, unable to process what I'd just heard. My father had just blamed my dead 6-year-old for company problems that didn't exist 10 days ago. Say that again, I said, my voice quiet. Dad looked directly at me. The company comes first. Always has. You used to understand that. I stood up slowly, my chair scraping loudly across the floor. My son's name was Ethan. He was 6 years old. He loved dinosaurs and could already read at a 3rd grade level. He died 4 days ago, and you couldn't even be bothered to stay through his entire funeral. I reached for my company badge and keys, setting them on the table with a finality that echoed in the quiet room. You want to know something, Dad? I've given this company everything. Missed vacations, worked 80-hour weeks, sacrificed time with my family, with my son, for this place. And it turns out the company I've been killing myself for isn't worth a single day of my son's life. I walked out without looking back. As I packed up my office, Tom appeared in the doorway. I heard, he said simply. They're making a mistake. Within an hour, word had spread. One by one, people started stopping by. Jim from estimating, Raphael from field operations, even Diane from accounting. By the end of the day, 7 key people had resigned, including Tom and Brett. Not with big dramatic speeches, just quiet, firm decisions that required no explanation. As I carried my box to the parking lot, Brett caught up with me. This isn't right, Cole. Your father's making the biggest mistake of his life, and I told him so. Those projects were fine. Chris messed with the schedules after you left, pushed deadlines up, reassigned crews, changed material orders. I wasn't surprised. Why are you telling me this? Brett looked at me, decades of loyalty warring with his sense of right and wrong. Because I've watched you grow up in this company. Because I helped your dad build this place, and I can't be part of what it's becoming. That night, I sat in Ethan's room, holding his favorite T-Rex toy, and made myself a promise. I wasn't going to just walk away. I was going to rebuild and make them regret the day they used my son's death against me. The next morning, my phone started blowing up with calls and texts. News travels fast in the construction world, especially news this juicy. By noon, I had job offers from 3 competitors and 2 former clients. Apparently, Chris had sent out an email to clients explaining my departure by hinting that I'd made critical errors on recent projects. Classic Chris move, throw me under the bus while I was still reeling from burying my kid. But it backfired spectacularly. Our clients weren't idiots. They knew who really ran those projects. One client, the CEO of Midwest Healthcare, called me directly. Cole, I got this bizarre email from your brother. What the hell is going on over there? When I told him the bare minimum, that I'd been pushed out after taking time off for my son's death, he was silent for a moment. Then, we're putting our next 3 projects on hold until this is sorted out. Your brother's not running our $20 million cancer center. No way. But one message stood out from all the others. Jack Russo, owner of Rivet Construction, and my dad's biggest competitor for the past 20 years. All it said was, lunch tomorrow? The Chop House. 1 p.m. Jack and I had crossed paths at industry events but never really talked. My dad hated him with a passion, claimed Jack had stolen clients years ago when they were both starting out. The rivalry was legendary in local construction circles. I figured I had nothing to lose, so I went. Jack was already there when I arrived. Tall, fit for a guy in his early 60s, salt and pepper haircut, military short. He stood to shake my hand. Firm grip, direct eye contact. "Thanks for coming, Cole. I heard what happened. Your old man's a real piece of work." We ordered, making small talk about industry gossip. Jack was surprisingly easy to talk to. Straightforward, no BS, with a dry sense of humor that reminded me of some of my site supervisors. He knew his stuff too, asked detailed questions about material cost trends and new structural systems. Finally, Jack got to the point. "I want you to come work for me. VP of Operations, full autonomy, salary that beats what you were making by 35%. And I want your guys, the ones who walked out with you. All of them." I almost choked on my water. "Why? You don't know me." "Not really." Jack leaned forward. "I know enough. I know you turned the Saint Luke's project around after the last contractor screwed it up, which happened to be me, by the way. I know your crews don't quit because you treat them like humans, not machines. And I know talent when I see it." He slid a folder across the table. Inside was a contract, already drawn up, with terms better than I expected. "Take a few days, think it over, but don't take too long. This industry moves fast." As I was leaving, Jack said one more thing. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry about your son. I lost my daughter to cancer when she was 12. Different kind of hell, but still hell." I hadn't known that about him. It explained a lot. That night, I got a surprise visitor. Brett showed up at my door. "I've got something you should see," he said, pulling out a flash drive. "Backed up before I left. Company policy, you know. Regular backups." His slight smile told me there was nothing regular about this backup. It was financial records, emails, project documentation, evidence that Chris had deliberately sabotaged my projects after I took leave. He'd reassigned key personnel, delayed material deliveries, and made impossible promises to clients. Brett sighed. "Your dad's been talking about retirement. Everyone assumed you'd take over, but Chris has been in his ear. This was their chance to push you out. They've been planning it for months. Just needed the right opportunity." The emails went back 6 months. Chris complaining to Dad that I had too much control. Dad agreeing they needed to realign leadership. They'd been plotting to demote me long before Ethan died. I stored the flash drive in my safe. Not for revenge, for protection. If they tried to blame failures on me, I had proof. 3 days later, I called Jack and accepted his offer with one condition. I wanted to build my own team from scratch. He agreed without hesitation. Within a month, I had moved into my new office at Rivet. The view was better, the coffee stronger, and the weight on my shoulders somehow lighter despite everything. Grace noticed it too, said it was the first time in years she'd seen me come home, without that tight look around my eyes. Jack was true to his word. Full autonomy, no micromanaging. Resources when I needed them. My team, the 7 who'd walked out with me, slotted into their new roles like they'd been there for years. Tom took over field operations, implementing a new quality control system that cut our rework by 40%. Raphael, who'd been underutilized at Ryan, revolutionized our tech infrastructure. Jim from estimating brought his entire client database with him. Perfectly legal. He'd built those relationships himself. Brett didn't come with us. Too old to start over, he claimed, but he consulted behind the scenes, helping us navigate the transition. He knew where all the bodies were buried at Ryan Construction, which projects were in trouble, which clients were unhappy, which subcontractors were looking for better partners. The first big test came 3 months in. The city announced bids for the new convention center expansion, $40 million project, the kind that makes or breaks companies our size. Both Rivet and Ryan Construction were on the short list, along with 2 national firms. I knew my dad would pull out all the stops. This project would be his legacy, but I had an advantage he didn't know about. Sean, my friend who'd been there for us during Ethan's hospitalization, was now working for the city's planning department. Not in procurement, but close enough to know which way the wind was blowing. "They're worried about Ryan's recent project delays," Sean told me over lunch one day. "Words getting around about missed deadlines. Your brother's making promises he can't keep." I wasn't surprised. Chris had always been better at talk than action. He'd swagger into meetings with fancy PowerPoints, but couldn't tell you how to properly lay a foundation. When bid day came, we submitted a proposal that wasn't the cheapest, but offered something different: certainty. We backed our timeline with liquidated damages that would hurt if we missed them, but I knew we wouldn't. I had the best team in the state. Our presentation to the city council was tight. Chris showed up for Ryan with a slick video and vague assurances. I could see the council members' skepticism growing as he dodged specific questions about their recent performance issues. 2 weeks later, Rivet won the contract. The announcement made front page of the business section, with quotes from Jack praising the team he'd assembled. My name was prominent, my role highlighted. It was the kind of publicity you can't buy. That night, my phone rang. Dad's number. I let it go to voicemail. His message was short. This isn't over, Cole. You're making a big mistake. I deleted it and went back to reviewing submittals for our new project. Over the next 6 months, clients started calling, specifically asking for me. Subcontractors who'd worked with me for years made it clear they preferred Rivet bids if I was running the job. Even city inspectors, notorious for being hard asses, seemed to cut us more slack. We landed 3 major healthcare projects that Ryan had been counting on. Not because I poached them, but because the clients sought us out. The regional director of MedCorp, a major hospital chain, was blunt. We're following you, Cole. Your old company's a mess now. It wasn't just about me, though. The team we'd built was exceptional. Tom revolutionized our field operations. Raphael implemented a technology system that cut our documentation time in half. We were leaner, faster, and hungrier than Ryan Construction could ever be. Jack gave me the freedom to implement ideas Dad had always shot down as unnecessary expenses, like an apprenticeship program that created a pipeline of skilled workers, and a project management system that gave clients real-time updates on progress and costs. 1 year after I joined Rivet, we had increased revenue by 42% and secured the top spot in regional commercial construction rankings, a position Ryan had held for 5 years straight. I wasn't deliberately trying to destroy my father's company. I was just building something better. But I'd be lying if I said I didn't feel a grim satisfaction when industry newsletters started reporting trouble at Ryan Construction. 18 months after I left, the first cracks in Ryan Construction started showing publicly. They lost the Porter County Courthouse project when they fell behind schedule, the same project Dad had used as an excuse to demote me. Then a lawsuit hit the papers. Faulty structural work on an office building, resulting in massive water damage. Behind the scenes, it was even worse. I heard from industry contacts that morale was in the toilet. Key people were jumping ship monthly. Projects were coming in late and over budget. Client complaints were piling up. The construction community in our region isn't large. Word travels fast when a company's in trouble. Suppliers started demanding payment up front. Bonding companies raised their rates. Subcontractors began building extra cushion into their bids for Ryan projects, assuming they'd face delays and changes. One Wednesday afternoon, Brett called me. We still met for lunch occasionally, though he'd officially retired 6 months earlier. They're in trouble, Cole. The bank's calling in loans. They've missed payroll twice. I shouldn't have cared. But decades of viewing that company as my future were hard to shake. How bad? Bad enough that your dad's looking for buyers. No takers so far. Brett told me Chris had run several projects into the ground with his incompetence. Without me there to fix his mistakes, the truth was finally coming out. Dad was still defending him, blaming everyone else. The economy, unreasonable clients, the weather, me. Your mom's worried sick, Brett added. She's afraid they'll lose everything. The company, the house, their retirement. I felt a pang of guilt about Mom. She'd enabled Dad and Chris for years, but she'd also been caught in an impossible position. Still, she'd made her choice when she didn't stand up for me or Ethan. 2 days later, my phone rang. Mom's number. I hesitated but picked up. Cole? Her voice was strained. Your father needs to talk to you. It's important. I'm sure it is, I replied. But I'm not interested. Please, Cole. The company's about to go under. He needs your help. I laughed. Couldn't help it. The company that fired me when my son died? That company? He made a mistake. We all did. Please, just talk to him. I agreed to a meeting. Neutral territory. A coffee shop downtown. I told Grace where I was going, and she just nodded. We were doing better these days, slowly rebuilding our life together. She'd found a grief support group that helped. I buried myself in work instead, but it was getting easier. Dad looked older than I remembered. More gray, deep lines around his eyes. Chris wasn't with him, interestingly enough. He got straight to the point. We're in trouble. I need your help to save the company. Why would I help you? I asked, genuinely curious about his answer. Because it's your legacy too. 20 years of your life. Your grandfather helped me start it. It's in your blood. I stirred my coffee slowly. My son was in my blood too. Didn't seem to matter much to you then. Dad had the decency to look away. I was wrong. What I said about Ethan? It was unforgivable. I was stressed and... Stop! I cut him off. You don't get to use his name. Not anymore. He nodded, then pushed a folder toward me. We're 3 weeks from bankruptcy. I'm prepared to offer you 51% ownership, full control. You can fire Chris if you want. I'll stay on as a consultant only. I opened the folder, scanned the proposal, then closed it. No. Think about it, Cole. Everything you built, I'm building something better now, I said, standing up. You wanted me to put the company first. I finally learned that lesson, just not the company you meant. As I walked out, he called after me. This is your family. I turned back one last time. Not anymore. 3 weeks later, Ryan Construction filed for bankruptcy. The news spread through the industry like wildfire. Former employees called me, wondering if Rivet was hiring. I took the ones worth having. Dad tried calling again. I blocked his number. Then came the morning I opened my front door to find Chris standing there, looking like hell. Unshaven, eyes bloodshot, wearing the same entitled expression he'd had his entire life. We need to talk, he said, trying to step inside. I blocked the doorway. No, we don't. Dad's in the hospital. Heart attack. They say it's serious. Something cold settled in my stomach, but I kept my face neutral. Sorry to hear that. That's it? Your father might be dying and that's all you have to say? What do you want from me, Chris? He glanced around nervously, then lowered his voice. I need money. The bankruptcy froze everything, and I've got some personal debts that can't wait. Of course. He wasn't here about Dad at all. Some things never change. How much? 80,000, he said, like he was asking to borrow $20. I laughed. Not happening. Come on, Cole, I know you're making bank at Rivet. This is nothing to you. You owe me. I owe you? For what exactly? Sabotaging my projects? Helping Dad push me out when my son died? That wasn't me. That was all Dad's idea. I have the emails, Chris. All of them. Brett backed everything up before he left. His face paled. Look, I made some mistakes, but I've got people after me. Serious people. I need this money. Gambling debts again? It wasn't the first time. Dad had bailed him out twice that I knew of. Get off my property, Chris. Dad gave you everything. You wouldn't be where you are without him. I stepped closer, my voice dropping. Dad gave me a job. Ethan gave me perspective. And you and Dad together gave me the push I needed to build something better. So in a way, I should thank you. Before he could respond, a car pulled into my driveway. Jack stepped out, looking surprised to see Chris. Everything okay here, Cole? He asked, walking up the path. Chris's eyes widened. You're working with him now? Does Dad know? Jack's not just my boss, Chris. He's my business partner. We're launching a new development company next month. Residential construction, high-end market. This was news we'd planned to announce next week. Rivet Development, a joint venture between Jack, myself, and 2 other investors. My chance to build something with my name on it. You smug bastard, Chris sputtered. After everything Dad did for you, I think you should leave, Jack said firmly. Now. Chris looked between us, then stormed off, kicking my mailbox on his way out. Jack raised an eyebrow. Charming family. You have no idea, I replied. Inside, Jack laid out the final plans for our new venture. We'd secured funding for a 150-unit luxury apartment complex, with options on 2 more parcels nearby. The city was eager to work with us based on our track record with the convention center. You know, Jack said as he was leaving, I had a similar falling out with my own father years ago. Not as dramatic as yours, but the same basic story. Old versus new. Tradition versus progress. He thought I was betraying the family by wanting to update our methods. Your dad probably worked with him back in the day, Ed Russo. I nodded. The name was familiar. I didn't talk to him for 5 years. When we finally reconnected, he admitted I'd been right. Too late for the business. That was gone. But not too late for us. He clapped me on the shoulder. Just something to think about. 2 days later, Brett called to tell me Dad had been released from the hospital. The heart attack had been minor. He also mentioned that Chris had been fired from what remained of the company after he'd been caught stealing from the petty cash fund. Your dad's selling the house, Brett added, downsizing to an apartment. Your mom's taking it hard. A week after that, I received a letter. Formal Ryan Construction letterhead. Dad's signature at the bottom. It contained a legal release of all claims against me, acknowledgement that project failures had been Chris's doing, not mine, and a formal written apology for the comments about Ethan. At the bottom, a handwritten note. I'll regret what I said and did until my dying day. Not asking for forgiveness. Just wanted you to know. I showed it to Grace that night. She read it carefully, then asked, What are you going to do? Nothing, I said. It's too late. The next morning was Ethan's birthday. He would have been 8. Grace and I took the day off, visited his grave, then spent the afternoon at the Children's Hospital, finalizing details for the Ethan Reynolds Memorial Fund we'd established. The fund would help families with children facing medical emergencies, covering bills, providing meals, even hotel rooms for parents who needed to stay close to their kids. It was the most meaningful thing we'd done since losing him. The hospital admin had been incredibly supportive, helping us structure it properly and connecting us with their existing family support services. As we left the hospital, my phone rang. Unknown number. Mr. Reynolds, this is Meredith from County General. Your father's been readmitted. He's asking for you. I almost declined, but something, maybe Ethan's memory, maybe just basic human decency, made me say, I'll be there in 30 minutes. I told Grace, who squeezed my hand and said she'd come along if I wanted. I told her to go home and rest. This was something I needed to do alone. The hospital was on the other side of town. I used the drive to remind myself that I wasn't doing this for Dad or for my old life. I was doing it to close a chapter properly, on my terms. Dad was alone in the room when I arrived. No Chris, no Mom, just monitors beeping and an old man looking even older than he had a few weeks ago. Thinner, diminished. For a second, I saw him as he must have looked to others. Not the towering figure of my childhood, but just a man who'd made terrible mistakes. He seemed surprised when I walked in. You came. I stood at the foot of his bed. What do you want? Sit down, please. I took the chair beside the bed, keeping distance between us. The doctors say I need bypass surgery, he said. Scheduled for tomorrow morning. I nodded, waiting. I wasn't going to make this easy for him. I know it's too late, he continued. What I said about Ethan, there's no taking that back. For the first time, he seemed genuinely remorseful, not just sorry for himself or the situation he'd created. I've spent my life building something I thought was important, he said slowly. Turns out I was destroying the only things that actually mattered. I didn't fill the silence. This was his moment to speak, not mine. The monitors beeped steadily, marking time between us. I saw the announcement about Rivet Development, he said. The apartment complex. It looks like an impressive project. I just nodded. Your grandfather used to say I had my priorities backward. Too focused on the business, not enough on the people. He was right. His eyes were tired, bloodshot. I wanted Ryan Construction to be my legacy. I thought I was building it for you and Chris. Turns out I was just building it for myself. I could have pointed out that I'd tried to tell him this for years. That I'd begged him to delegate more, to take vacations, to come to Ethan's t-ball games. But what was the point now? I'm not asking for your forgiveness, or your help, he said finally. I just wanted to look you in the eye and tell you I was wrong. About everything. And to say I'm proud of what you've built. You've done it the right way. I studied him for a long moment. Is that all? He nodded. That's all. I stood up. Good luck with your surgery. At the door, I paused. I'll have someone check in with your doctors tomorrow. Let me know how it went. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't reconciliation. But it was the most I could offer right then. Walking out of that hospital, I felt lighter somehow. Not because things were fixed. They weren't, and probably never would be. But because I'd faced him on my terms, without anger clouding my judgment. I'd shown him the man I'd become without him. Later that night, Sean and Steve came over with their wives for dinner. It was becoming a monthly tradition. Good food, easy conversation. As we sat on the deck watching the sunset, I realized these were the people who'd stood by us when it mattered. This was what family was supposed to be. 2 months later, Rivet Development broke ground on our first project, a 150-unit luxury apartment complex. The mayor came, along with various city officials and business leaders. Jack gave a short speech about building for the future, then handed the microphone to me. I talked about sustainable design, community integration, and economic impact. All the things you're supposed to mention at these events. As I was finishing, I noticed someone standing at the back of the crowd. Dad, recovered from his surgery, watched from across the street as we held the ceremony. He didn't approach, and I didn't invite him over. Some wounds don't heal. Some bridges stay burned. But as I stood there with the people who had become my real family, I realized something important. The company that fired me when my son died had unknowingly set me free. I'd built something authentic, something that honored Ethan's memory. And that's a foundation that won't crumble when the storms come.